Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is cosmonaut Tara.
Greetings, comrades.
Hey, oh, that's a nice touch. That's a nice touch. Welcome everyone. It's a science fiction movie podcast. We get together, we watch the movie, and we talk about it. And we're currently in the process of 70s month, kind of. I say kind of because of the delay. It's actually going to be more like 4 70-month movies, but spread over 2 months, because we had some delays getting this episode ready, and as a result, it also means that we're going to have some delays getting to the next 70s movies. The next episode you probably get, I imagine, will be Matrix 4?
Probably.
But not to worry, the movie that won the vote for this month and the 4th 70s movie will both get done, and we'll do our countdown in January. So everything's still happening. It just, unfortunately, we had to delay some recordings. It's basically Christmas season, and the fact that Tara's away for a week next week just meant that we had to move things around. So nothing to worry about. But we're here today to talk about Solaris, the original 1972 Andrei Tarkovsky film. And I've been looking forward to doing this because I'd seen it a long time ago before, but I really fell in love with Stalker a couple of years ago when I saw that for the first time. So I was very excited to revisit Solaris and sort of like go, because I think the first time I saw it, it was probably like a decade ago. I was young and stupid. I was kind of excited about going back to it with a more experienced cinematic eye, I suppose. Yes. So we both watched the movie twice because it's very long and dense. So a lot to dive into. This is a very philosophical film, much like Stalker was. And as a result, I imagine this will be a very sort of, I wouldn't say a philosophical conversation per se, but it is very open to interpretation. It's open to discussing what exactly the movie's trying to say. It may be saying multiple things for discussion's sake. It may, there's a lot of things to get into here. And obviously we'll get into that mostly in the spoiler section, which we'll warn you about, because obviously we have to dig in deep for that. But yes. So what is Solaris? You might be asking. Solaris is a film from 1972, and it is about a psychologist who is sent to a space station. So it's set in the future, right, of the time. Sent to a space station because the crew of this space station over the planet Solaris is diminished. Most people have left. The government don't really take it seriously anymore because there's not been results. It seems like they've been up there studying this place for a long time. It is a planet that is entirely ocean, and the few people who are still there are they act very weird. Everyone who goes to live on this station tends to come back with weird stories, tends to start acting erratically, not making much sense to anyone else. So this psychologist is going up there,
space madness, to
assess if they should shut this place down or try something more extreme, like just firing radiation at the water to see what happens. So that's kind of his mission, and when he goes up, he experiences the weird effects that the planet has on the people on this station, and it explores life, it explores loss, it explores regret, it explores a lot of things. Unsurprisingly with this, because Tarkovsky's not just, he's not out here to make a Star Wars movie. He's here to just use the science fiction to get really heady and discuss big ideas and explore the human condition, if you will. So that is very much what it is. This is not an action-packed adventure. Not that I don't think anyone's going to stumble onto this thinking it's that, but I can see people like seeing George Clooney on a poster for the remake and going, "Oh, Solaris, this looks like a sci-fi epic. I'm going to watch this." And then I've not seen the remake, so I don't know how closely it sticks to the gist of this one, but I suspect it's probably not the adventure movie that some people thought it might be. So what did you think of Solaris?
I think it's pretty good. It's very ethereal, dreamlike. I think it's really interesting, actually, that this movie was made in Soviet Russia. Seems like not the kind of film that you would expect from that time. Seems like a director who was maybe angry with the way that his government works, and I don't know. It's a very interesting film for that time and place. But I liked it.
It is. And it's funny because I did read, just not that I did much research for this, but I did catch a passing glimpse at the idea that, yeah, that there was censors, as you'd imagine, in Soviet Russia when it came to entertainment and media and things like that. And basically, part of the idea with Tarkovsky is that the ideas he'd put in his films that the government wouldn't agree with would be so, like, you'd really have to analyze it to break it down to get the messages that the government wouldn't agree with. So anyone who checked it wouldn't get the movie, so therefore wouldn't say it's anti-Soviet or anything like that.
It's not a film for the weak-minded.
So, I mean, it feels like a cop-out to say he just made it too smart for them to understand that it was like, if it was being critical of the Soviet government, then they wouldn't spot it. But that's effectively kind of what he did at points in his career.
He just David Lynched them.
Kind of. He didn't make it completely like at face value. But if you start like, these films are really philosophical. So once you start discussing philosophy, it's not really much of a stretch to then say maybe he's critical of certain things that Soviet Russia were party to.
Yeah. Or just like a film in general, like you expect movies from that type of communist country to have more propaganda involved. Something, I mean, I'm not saying there wasn't great art that came from there. There certainly was. But like you just sort of expect a certain type of film. Not something so abstract and, questioning the world.
I just love the idea that how do you get this past like the censors, and not for like a violent, because it's often when we talk about censorship we talk about censoring violence or sex or whatever, but just getting past censors who will censor ideas. You just make it too smart for them to understand, so that they can't censor it. I guess this is fine. It seems like
they don't want to look dumb, so they're like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, we get it. It's very pro-Soviet, I think. Yes.
So yeah, but it's the Russians that made it to outer space, right? Okay.
Yes. Do you know what
they won the space race.
The sad part is I bet that probably is part of like what gets this sort of through. It's like, oh, this is saying that we're in space and we're advanced and we have space
did it before
stations.
The Americans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although when you think about it, they kind of already won the space race. America just counts like, okay, oh yeah, but you didn't get to the moon first. That's where we draw the line for some reason. Well, the reason is because that's when we beat them. But everything else, the Soviets definitely got there first.
Well, to be fair, we also draw the line there because the next target after that would be Mars, which we've still not gotten to because it's really hard.
No, but there have been other major accomplishments like the space station.
What did you like about the movie?
I liked the moment that we see someone in space onward. A lot.
So you weren't a fan of the first 45 minutes? I
understand why it's there, but it is quite long. There's a lot of it.
I am quite fond of much of the first 45 minutes.
There are bits in it that I like. One thing I thought was strange was the constant switch of tone. So like it would be in color and then some scenes were in black and white and some scenes were like sepia, and it seemed like a strange, it didn't seem to be like, oh well, it's in black and white because it reminds you of watching it on a television and it's more like a news thing, so maybe this is more, I don't know, biographical and this is more maybe something that is being influenced or whatever because it's in color. I couldn't quite figure out like why the choice of different films.
It's mostly in color. There are just key sequences where it does shift to like it's like a blue sepia. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think people know what I mean when I say that. And then there's obviously a couple that are just more straight up black and white. It's interesting you bring this up though, because Stalker actually played with this as well, with different visual techniques. And that is really clear what they mean. And it's actually a really great moment because it starts off with like a kind of a sepia look and it switches to like regular color at a certain specific point, and it's really notable when it does it, and it really makes you think about what it's saying and what it's doing. And I think here it's still used to reasonable effect, and in the sense that I think you are supposed to think about why it has switched and what each time it switches, what it represents. I think the cold, colorless kind of like tone that it kind of comes down with at certain points is there to emulate when the world doesn't feel real, or it's there to emulate when things feel empty or desolate, or they're kind of cold scenes, like thematically. And there's a few specific examples that I can think of. There are definitely little like just parts of ends of scenes that switch to it that, like, if I'd have to like rewatch the scene again and kind of really think about, okay, why is this specific moment switched to this? But I wouldn't say it's too constant though. It's not that frequent. It's kind of it's a little bit there early on, and then once it gets to the station, it's not really that often.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's, I don't know. I couldn't quite figure it out. What it was trying to do with that, like what the purpose of it was. I couldn't connect the dots with them. Is what I'm trying to say. But I do like the movie overall. I like the story. I think the plot's quite good, and I like where it goes. I also love the costumes.
Okay.
Our lead guy like wears this fishnet chartreuse green shirt for a while, and he looks so cool in it. I don't know, confident, even though he's kind of like pudgy.
Was it yellow? I thought it was yellow, but I mean...
Yeah, like chartreuse is kind of like almost like a neon.
Okay.
It's a very yellow green tone. A very odd color, and then but no one says anything about it, so it must be okay. In the future, it's all right. This is just what people wear.
To be fair, the only characters who see him in it are like already kind of crazy from their time on the station. So I mean, I don't know if we can trust their judgment.
I just thought, what a wild style that people have in the future. That's awesome. I like. I really like when it gets to the station, because you definitely feel a change in just the way it's being shot. Like it feels, oh yeah, this is sci-fi. Because the first 45 minutes you're on a ranch or just someone's house, a cottage or whatever in the woods, like near a lake and stuff, and it's very much like just people talking, and the conversations are interesting, and it is setting up a very science fiction thing. But then all of a sudden, like, you see a man fly through space and he's on a station, and it gets real like more confident in the filmmaking part of it. So it becomes like, oh wow, this is what I was looking for.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is that I know Tarkovsky is on record as saying he didn't really like 2001 that much. And it's fascinating to sort of see, because I think there's a good reason to sort of consider Tarkovsky and Kubrick and some other directors of this time period of being in kind of like the round table, if you will, of the time, right? Where they're contemporary directors making some of like the best films that were considered at the time. Obviously Kubrick is more known to a Western audience just because they're in English, but Tarkovsky's kind of, on that level from a different country. And what's interesting is that like the trip to the space station, like, it's just kind of like ethereal and almost abstract. We don't really get to see it properly. It's just kind of shown from his face, and you don't really see much of what the trip looks like. Whereas you compare that to 2001, Kubrick's doing like slow shots of ships spinning for 10 minutes, showing how the
Blue Danube plane.
Yeah.
Da, 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 blah,
So,
blah,
but so you can. I think what I like about that is you can see how these two really talented filmmakers both have completely different tastes in what they want out of science fiction. Because Tarkovsky, like I was reading there's some like his thoughts. This was just like on the Wikipedia. He was talking about this and Stalker, which is because those are his two sci-fi movies, and he said that he thought Stalker was more successful to him than this one was.
Did that one come after?
Stalker came after, yeah. Stalker Kate was I would say early 80s. But Stalker, he felt like completely transcended the genre, and it kind of does. Like this one still has some of the trappings in the sense that because we're still going to a space station, there's still like characters having to spout a lot of exposition, and he felt that this one still had to kind of like function a little bit too much within the constraints of what a sci-fi movie is. Because that's the interesting thing about Tarkovsky, is he wants to use the sci-fi to tell these really interesting philosophical stories about characters and human nature, but he's not necessarily interested in some of the more nerdy sci-fi shit that we like from other things. He's not interested in doing lots of space stuff or doing lots of spaceship stuff. He's interested in the human condition and what it's saying about like the meaning of life and memory and time and what all these things like mean. It's a bit of a tone poem in a lot of ways at times.
Yeah, I was getting some real Blade Runner vibes from the story.
But it's much, much better than Blade Runner. I'm just going to put that out there right now.
I mean, I also agree.
It's much better. I actually read afterwards as well that Christopher Nolan listed this as an influence that inspired Inception, and I can kind of see it, actually, with one particular element. I can see the gears in Tara's head turning.
I'm working on it. You're going to have to tell me.
To do...
Is it about... Okay, maybe I know.
Yes, okay. I don't want to spoil it.
It's about Harry.
Yes. Okay.
I can see that.
Right. So, yeah, like the movie's playing with a main character who is cold, who is cynical, who doesn't believe anyone when they tell them anything about the station. Really, he's really cut off about it. And it's kind of about him, like, sort of connecting with his humanity through learning about, like, what things actually mean to him. There's a big... and I think part of the reason why that first part of the movie is so important is because there's a big... You're supposed to feel the absence of world, right? You're supposed to feel the absence of...
Yeah, I mean, you definitely get reminded of the natural world while you're there the whole time. I mean, he takes a walk around the pond every morning, they say, and they really, you know... I mean, the opening shots are of the water and
so
putting his hands in it and stuff like that.
When you're on the station, you're supposed to feel the absence of all that. You're supposed to feel the absence of natural life and the absence of Earth. And there's discussion about missing certain sounds from Earth, of missing the feel of a breeze, the sound of rustling. There's a little bit where he says, "Oh, if you put these bits of paper up against the vents, it will sound like leaves rustling at night time." And it's just all these little things of, like, I think this movie at its core is about both appreciating the people in the world and what you have around you, but also at the same time not wanting to fall victim to just like being in love with nostalgia and like the things from before.
Yeah. Nostalgia is a big topic in this.
Yeah. But it's kind of, but it's not like a one-sided thing though, because I feel like often when these subjects come up, it's one or the other. I think this one, I actually think the fear of nostalgia is the lesser of the two. I think a lot more of it is about the main character, Kelvin, him not really dealing with his past or the people around him and not appreciating that. I think that's actually a bigger deal than and nostalgia's not even the right word. I actually think I regret using that word now. Now that I'm thinking about it. I regret using nostalgia because I think it's a bit more... It's less about remembering the good times, and it's more about... Oh, spoilers. so we'll get into that in the nitty gritty. But these are the sort of conversations that I think this movie brings up. But it also brings up some cool science fiction stuff that, as to what constitutes a living being and what constitutes someone being a sentient living being with rights. And these almost feel like a happenstance in a weird way, but at the same time they do add to the themes, because so much about the movie is like, what is life, what counts as life, and appreciating that life for what it is. And like, so there's all these things that click together very nicely. It's definitely a thinking person's movie though, and it's one that I think, having watched it twice for the purpose of this, like, I did kind of appreciate it even more the second time, which was my third viewing overall. But I think it's one that every time you watch it, you're probably going to think about it a little bit differently, because you're coming at it from a different lens. You're coming at it again, which I guess is a lot of red flags for people who don't want, some snobby, like, movie that's not some action film. Yes, if the sound of this scares you... I mean,
it's already a foreign film. Those people aren't going to watch it anyway.
That's true. That's true. I don't know. I feel like that's there is some crossover now. I feel like there's been enough successful things in the last couple of decades, foreign movie wise, that some people might actually still want to try foreign films, but don't want this type of film.
Okay. It has to be Parasite. That's it.
Or
has zombies.
Yeah, I was thinking more stuff like Train to Busan, which is a great movie. I love Train to Busan, but
Well, I mean, the horror community has always been more forgiving about that. They've always been more into foreign films, I'd say, just because there's so much good stuff that comes from Asia.
But no, I love the set design. I love that the station has this kind of like, there's a lot of red in the walls, and I kind of love that because obviously red you associate with blood, so you feel like you're inside something living, but it's not real. It's a fake living, because real living, well, there is red in real living obviously because we all have blood, but you know, in the context of this movie, the real living is all represented with green. It's all represented with
I would say
trees.
red's like literally the opposite color of green.
Yeah.
So it's kind of reminding you that it's not natural. You're very much away from nature.
Yeah. And obviously everything's very kind of sterile. I mean, it's a little bit run down and like there's those wires like dangling out at certain places, but it's very sterile. It's very like the rooms themselves, the quarters are just these sort of plain areas for the most part.
I don't understand the one room with the melting fridge in the middle of it. It's like one of the main hallways, but there's like this, it looks like a refrigerator or like maybe like a snack vending machine, but it's like slightly melted and off, a little askew, little Tower of Pisa.
I mean, I wonder if is that supposed to be that way, or is that because something happened at some point that did it?
I don't know.
Did that to it?
Of all the things I want an explanation for, it's that.
It's just, I mean, it's probably just part of the damage. That's kind of what I took it as.
I don't know. Is it supposed to be like that? Is it just a space thing? Is it important that it's askew? Why has no one fixed it if it's not?
I don't have an answer for you.
If it is a vending machine, does it still work?
Why do you think it's a vending machine? Nothing about it gave me vending machine vibes.
It looks a little like a vending machine of the future.
Wasn't it like clear?
It was like white. It was pretty opaque.
Yeah, so it didn't look like it had anything inside it, which is why I'm doubting the vent. Unless you're thinking it's like a Star Trek like materializer that just spits something out. It doesn't feel like they have that technology. It's actually kind of funny the way he kind of arrives at the station. It kind of just feels like he parks a rocket. I mean, you don't see it, but that's kind of the implication, is that he's just come out of a dock and it's just kind of like everything's kind of dirty and concrete and blah blah blah. It's and metal, concrete and metal. That's all everything is.
It looks a little bit like he gets the Contact version of space travel, which is like a sphere that's transparent that he's just flying through space. And then all of a sudden he's on the station. We do see a rocket though later on, so we know like they do travel by rocket. It was the first sci-fi thing we saw, so it was like, oh whoa, what's this? And then all of a sudden he's on the station and surrounded by steam. It's very industrial looking.
And then of course you got the planet itself, which is just, I mean, obviously I said it's an ocean planet, which basically means it's just a body of water, but every time it cuts to the body of water, it swirls in interesting ways. It's always kind of a weird color. It does kind of always feel very ethereal and ominous and like, oh, there's like something more mysterious, which is actually something else I love about Stalker. And I love about this is that Tarkovsky is really good at taking like a weird abstract idea and just solidifying it so much that it feels like something has a presence, even though it's just an ocean. Like, even though it's just an ocean, when it starts cutting to it, the more it cuts to it throughout the film is stuff that's happening and they're talking about it like it's sentient or whatever. Like, whenever it cuts to it, you do sort of like think about it and go, oh, there's this force coming from down below that's having an effect on them. You feel it. It becomes this tangible thing almost. And that's really impressive because, most directors who try and, take something that abstract and make it part of the plot, it usually just feels like forced and goofy and like a plot device. And I don't think it ever does here. It actually genuinely feels like it has character, which is absurd to think about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he uses just shots of bodies of water and then he puts a filter over top of it to make it look alien. But there are some moments where it doesn't behave like water, for sure. Like it seems to be maybe mercury or something that's been used instead. Something that's like, well, that doesn't really look like what I know an ocean to look like, even if it's not blue. I mean, there's something else there.
To be fair, you say that as if we don't. I mean, who says this is water? We know it's an ocean. Like, they never said it was water, technically.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, there's something very alien about it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like it could be some weird alien. We may not have this substance.
Well, they've established that this I mean, the reason that Solaris is built there is because they don't really know what the planet is made of, but they know that or they think it might be of use to us. Like, it's just some unknown material that maybe could be, used for technology or whatever.
Yeah. It's a cool effect whenever it cuts down to it, though. I dig it. Performances are by and large very good.
I would say the girl that plays Harry is excellent, like really good.
She's very good.
Everyone else is good. I think she's like the standout of the film.
Do you want a bit of trivia on the actress who played Harry?
Sure.
While she was making the movie, she fell in love with the director.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She seemed pretty young.
So just a bit of trivia. I happened to see that when I was doing a little bit of reading afterwards, and I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting tidbit.
Did they like date or
I don't
get
think
married?
so. I don't think so. I think it was.
She just fell in love.
She fell in love. I think it was unrequited. Which it kind of mirrors her character in a weird way. I don't want to talk about her too much because she is very spoiler.
Are we not in spoilers yet?
No, we're not in spoilers yet. So yeah, she is very good. I think also Kelvin's good. I also like Snout, who the entire time I was thinking you're the Russian Lance Henriksen. That was my description of her in my head. So I think it's obviously a very small cast because it is mostly on a space station with a very limited amount of people. There's a few characters on Earth, of course, that we see before, but by and large, it's not a big cast. And I'm noticing there's definitely a lot of like parallels with this and Stalker in like limited cast, very philosophical, sort of abstract ideas made more realized and treated like they're important, and that working. Like I can definitely tell they're both made by the same person. Like I can feel the artist strokes, if you will, if you know whatever fancy terminology you want to use between them. So no, I like the performances. It's it's a cheery movie. It's very dour for a lot of it.
Yeah.
You might joke that that's just Russians, but to be fair, the subject of the movie is pretty like it's so gargantuan in scope that it is a very sort of daunting thing that they are all kind of freaking out about. Understandably.
Sure. Although some of the reactions from people when things start happening are kind of like, you're not really giving a whole lot here. Maybe it's just a Russian stoicism thing.
Yeah. So, no, cast is good. And direction is very strong. There's a lot of really interesting cinematography. We talked about playing with the colours, but like the station itself is, it's donut shaped, right? It's got that classic sort of space station donut shape to it. And there is shots where they've clearly built, if not a full circular hallway, enough of it that they're doing really long shots going around it. And there's a lot of play of mirrors in here. Interestingly, I've not seen it yet, but Tarkovsky did make a film called Mirror, so I'm curious to see like how they're using that. But here, the idea of reflections, and there's a big speech about reflections that we'll have to bring up later. So a lot of really smart touches. Even at the start of the movie, when it's Kelvin just looking at the water near his father's house, there's a couple of moments where it'll just be nature on its own, and then he'll walk into frame. And then the camera will pan to reveal the house, which is the man-made structure, because up until that point, there's been no man-made structures. The only man-made things on the screen up until this point are literally the clothes that he's wearing. And like other than that, it's just nature. Not that I'm suggesting he should have been naked. I'm just saying, like, that's how it is. So he's in nature, it transitions to a man-made structure, and starts to introduce the themes, which we're about to get into, I think, in spoilers. But is there anything else you want to add before we get into the spoilers?
No, I think I'm ready.
The spoilers. So yeah, we'll get a spoiler warning then. So full spoilers for Solaris from this point on. And the movie has 2 hours and 47 minutes or something like that. It is a long ass movie. And I think we could go through it in order. I feel like just talking about it in terms of themes is probably a better idea.
Sure.
To keep this like more of a coherent conversation. The big sort of plot beats that I was avoiding talking about much is that the station forms people from... It forms avatars of people based on whoever's on the station and their memories. So Harry, who we mentioned, is Kelvin's wife, his dead wife. So Solaris creates a new version of her from his memory. And the others, because there's glimpses of other characters who we see just glimpses of at the start, who are like, wait, they're not meant to be here. Who's this random person with snout? Who's this?
Yeah, a child just wandering or something.
Well, it's a little person. I think it's the other scientist. Yeah. There's like a little person runs out, and he has to like kick him back into the room, and it's like, wait.
I thought he was kind of abusive, so maybe it was an adult.
Yeah. And then I'm like, well, he's definitely not on the manifest. like who are these extra people that are here? So the film is largely about him and his reaction to seeing his dead wife, and then exploring this dead wife, because he basically tries to kill her, and then she comes back because Solaris will just keep making her again, and there's a lot of philosophical questions that come up, and then the backstory between him and his wife come up, and these are all the sort of things that are drawn out as the film progresses, and they discuss what's going on. So yeah, really cool plot. There's a really lot of interesting things to come from this.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on inside it.
Yeah, I think like the themes to start with, I think, there's the character stuff with Kelvin specifically, about him being detached and cold. What really stuck out to me, especially like watching it the second time the last week, was knowing, like, and having watched it through again so I remembered everything, and then watching it again with all that fresh in my head, is that there's that scene before he leaves where he's just like tossing some of his old shit in a fire, and he's father who's quite old now, like not really thinking he's going to be alive by the time he gets back, because it's a long trip and whatever, and he's like, there's some important stuff that I've left in the house, but this can just go in a fire. And this is actually one of the scenes where the colour's been drained, and it's got this kind of cold look to it. So like just this idea that he doesn't really value things around him. He's very standoffish with his father. They kind of they don't fight, but there's just kind of this bickering. It's not like a very loving, embracing conversation. They're kind of just debating. He's like debating his thoughts on Solaris with him. He's debating everything else with him. And it's like, okay,
he's
so
like an angsty teen, but an older man.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you, Dad.
Yeah.
Or your new wife.
But better middle aged, is definitely the vibe. Yeah. And his reaction when he gets there, though, his reaction when he sees Harry specifically, is obviously fear. He's like, my dead wife's like sitting there, like what's happening? What's going on? And there's a bit of foreshadowing here because you see a needle mark on her arm, and that's obviously explained later. But like his tactic here is to convince her to put on a spacesuit and go into the rocket, and then he launches her into space. And he's clearly not very good at this, because he actually he does set himself on fire. He almost kills himself getting rid of this Harry.
Luckily, there was a handy fire blocking blanket there.
That makes sense in a space station, I think.
I think if you really think about jet fuel and sending a rocket into space, I don't think that he would be like minor injuries, but that's okay.
Oh no, I agree with that. I'm just saying that the heat blanket makes sense to have around.
Sure.
I mean, my bigger argument would be, why is it having to launch when they're in space? Literally, if you just open the door, it'll float out.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, you don't need to launch it with fuel of any kind. I'll open the door and give it a nudge. Like, that'll be it.
Yeah, use the fuel once you're already in space.
Yes. Yeah, you use the fuel to sort of direct yourself, but look, once you're moving at a speed, you can just glide, like, effectively. Like, you don't need to do anything else.
Yeah.
But that's okay. And then Harry, of course, comes back, and this time, though, he sort of, because obviously he speaks to Stout in between to like demand answers, like, what the hell's going on? What is this? Because the first time he talks to them, they're just like, you know what? You're not going to believe a word. You're not going to understand. You just have to experience it for yourself. So we're not talking. Just piss off. Like, go.
Yeah, they're really unhelpful.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. He says, we'll talk in the morning. But he says that knowing that by the time they get to him in the morning, that he'll see evidence of what happens here, and it'll be an easier conversation because he'll believe them. The
scientist that he was going there or looking forward to seeing is someone that he's known in the past, but that one killed himself.
Yeah.
Because he thought he was the only one having the visions.
Yeah, he he leaves like a message for him that which he watches, and it sets up the kind of the tension and some of the themes.
It's sort of giving us also the exposition through his video message of what's really happening.
Yeah, because there's like someone, I think that's the one with the child that you mentioned. There's a child running around in this video, and you only see like the back of her head. You don't really see much of her, but just enough to imply there's a kid running around, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's like I want to say like a teenage girl or something there too, and then there was I think Snout had a small child. You see a child like laying down behind him when you first see Snout, and then the other doctor has like the little person.
Yeah.
I think those are the ones we see.
But so when Harry comes back the second time, he just kind of calmly I wouldn't say accepts it, but he doesn't react the same way he did before. He sort of like just tries to accept it and just sort of see where it goes. And at first, Harry, if he leaves her on her own, because he doesn't even like try to do anything mean, he just sort of leaves the room and shuts the door. But she like freaks out when he shuts the door. Like the idea of being disconnected from him like scares the shit out of her. And
enough to break through the door. Yeah,
she makes a big dent. She's like a Terminator trying to break through. And then her cuts like heal kind of magically, right, when he goes to help her. And it's this interesting idea, I think, from if you look at the plot with her and some of the themes with her, like does she count as a living being, is she sentient, all that stuff, is that she does have an arc where she starts off being too scared to be left alone without him, but then as the film goes on, like it becomes okay, and she not only does she start having her own thoughts, but she also like can be left on her own. Eventually she starts to like have her own thoughts and ideas, and the idea that she doesn't really have any real memories. She has like the memories kind of she's supposed to have to an extent, but they're not real, so she doesn't have any experience. But
no, she's very much just a newborn adult.
But as she lives for like a day or two, she actually starts to have her own experiences, and therefore she starts to form her own opinions. So one of the themes of the movie is absolutely like what makes us human. Is it a series of memories? Which leads us to the question, like, well, if you take away our memories, are we a different person then? And is there someone who has completely lost their memory? Like, are they just classed as like, okay, they should just be counted as new, because ultimately they can never be the exact same person they were before.
No, I mean, obviously, just because someone has like Alzheimer's or dementia doesn't mean that they're not who they are anymore.
I mean, I'm not saying I should be. I'm just posing the question.
I'm not directing that towards you.
Oh, good. Because it sounded like you were saying I'm an idiot for saying that someone with no memory.
No.
Okay. But I think it's an interesting question. Again, it's a philosophical question. It's like, what makes up who we are? Is it a series of memories and experiences? Is it just because the counterpoint to this is that the other scientist, the asshole one, he's like, she doesn't count as a person because she's made up of neutrinos instead of what we're made up of. So she's just a slab of beef, basically. We don't have to consider her feelings. We don't have to treat her in any specific way. We can be horrible to her. We can treat her like a lab rat. It doesn't matter because she doesn't count. She's not real. That's his attitude, which I definitely don't agree with. Like, I think once a being can think for themselves, once they can fear, you've crossed the line. They feel
pain.
Yeah, they feel pain. So there is a line that's been crossed. We're like, no, this is a living being of some kind. Like, just because they don't fit into the box that we fit into doesn't necessarily mean they're not. They shouldn't have some sort of rights or some sort of empathy. So that's one of the themes of the movie. Super interesting. And that side of things is definitely one of the most science fiction-y elements, but it still fits into the philosophical questions that the movie's asking as well.
Right. This is sort of the Blade Runner comparison of like our synthetics humans, or is data a human and deserves rights just because it's something that's built or is artificial, or something that is a copy of someone, or clones, humans too. Do we treat them that way? Or, it's a common sci-fi theme. This is done in a very different way. This is, but it's familiar sci-fi.
Yeah, and I also think in this case specifically though, the other element to it which goes away from the synthetic comparison is the idea that she's created from a memory. So there's the idea of like, well, this person is gone, so this isn't really Harry, right? This is the Harry that's in his head. So one of the things that I took from this as well at the start is part of her fear of being left alone. And part of it's kind of backed up because he does believe, we find out later on that the real Harry committed suicide, and it was after they separated. So it's not so much that he has this weird like view on what happened necessarily, but the idea that because she did kill herself after they separated, he kind of remembers her as being dependent on him. And I was wondering if that plays into why she's so scared of being left alone without him early on in the movie. But even just on a larger scale, like the idea that, well, she's based on what he thinks she was, not what she actually was. And he's probably close, but you can never really be, like, even my interpretation of you, right? Like, it's not going to be exactly who you are. It's going to be how I view you in the world. Same with anyone else. So that's a really interesting theme to explore as well, is that this is a version of her that's only kind of like his interpretation of her. And that's not because he's a horror...
Based on very, extreme memories of her.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Like a very of closeness, of love, which she has a lot of for him, and ones of, obviously the traumatic suicide that you went through. And
it's not to say that I'm saying he's like a shitty person for... I don't think any of the sort of the faults in her from being created from his memory are conscious things that he intentionally thinks of maliciously. It's just... inherently,
just the things that we have in our minds, we're going to hold on to those more extreme ends of things.
Yeah,
the good memories and the ultra bad ones too.
For example, if they created you from my memories, you'd probably always have a Garrett Graham t-shirt on, just because that's like the first thing I associate with you. So, like
I should probably get one. You would always have headphones on, even not podcasting.
Oh, really? Okay, that'd be my thing. Okay, I can see it. So, like, I think that's a really cool, like, idea to explore as well. Is that she's never really her. She's always just. And this is the other thing that I also love about this, is that it's also because I often joke when I'm talking about bad movies, when I'm talking about The Room or Bird Out. One of the things that I always say when I talk about the dialogue in those movies is it's like an alien who's like observed human beings tries to like recreate what we are like in a movie, but something's not quite right. I always actually weirdly I thought of those movies a little bit when I was watching this, not because of the filmmaking, obviously, because it's night and day.
That's exactly what's happening though.
But yeah, in the sense that this ocean, this sentient planet or sentient like whatever it is, it's effectively trying to create a living human out of like memories of the people on board. So it is kind of like them trying to understand how we are. So I think the other big theme of this movie to me is like an outside force trying to understand us, and the creations that it makes are a little off because it doesn't quite get us yet.
Actually, I was thinking about the film and why the alien entity is doing this, because I was a bit confused. It's obviously trying to establish communication, but is it learning from creating these beings in their head? Like, they have the ability to go into our heads and create something from memory, so they're clearly very powerful, but they also seem kind of limited on their abilities to communicate.
Assuming that's not by choice.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess it kind of plays into the theme of experimentation. So, humans are willing to... Hold on.
Okay.
Humans are there to, like, experiment on Solaris and see what they can take from it. But really, like, we're sort of the rats in the cage for Solaris and experimenting on humans.
Yeah, basically what I was going to say is that effectively we are exactly to them as they are to us, and they're like, because they mentioned in the movie that all these things started happening when they first like shot some x-rays down to the ocean to see what would happen, and I like the idea that what Solaris is doing to them is just the same thing. It's just like firing stuff into their heads and seeing what happens, and it's just 1-to-1 almost. It's just that's all it is. And obviously reflections are a big part of the movie, and I think the idea that these beings are being created out of like a mirror of like what's in the head of these other characters is, and there's a couple of notable conversations that Harry has with Kelvin that are shot in a mirror, where they're looking at a mirror when they're having the conversation. That's when we find out, not that she died, I think, but it's when we find out that that his mother didn't like her, and that's like part of the backstory that's brought up throughout. Well, before we go any further, since we're talking about what the planet's doing and what it's trying to figure out, I think this is a good time to go back to the start of the movie and talk about the testimony that's given from the pilot.
Okay.
In the old film reel. So basically this guy, what was his name? Burton. He wanted to show, and we know that some time has passed because in present day he's got, he's balded a bit and he's a bit older, and he looks younger in the film. And he was a pilot back when the station was more.
Actually, they look so different. I did not realize that they are the same person until like the end of it.
I have to admit, I didn't notice it immediately. It was like halfway through the scene on the first viewing where I kind of went, "Oh wait, this is the same guy. He's just older here." So good makeup job. I mean, if nothing else, it was convincing.
It might just be a wig. The toupee. The toupee might be the thing that did it.
But he wanted to come and like sort of give a heads up to our main character Kelvin. Right, and he happens to know Kelvin's father, which is why he's got kind of like a direct line to him. And he comes over and shows, here's this testimony, and it was like, and it's a lot of this is exposition. This is how we set up at the start, that there's weird effects happening on the station, and everyone who's there is kind of acting weird, and no one knows why they're acting this way. And he tells this great story in his testimony about how him and some of the pilots were missing for a few hours when they went out to do a flight over the ocean, and one pilot didn't come back. But this Burton guy did, obviously, and he's talking about how when they were flying over the ocean, they started to see like almost like massive like land forming, or it was like a substance was like solidifying, creating little islands, or trying to do something, right? He was having a hard time to describe it, but it was sort of like trying to say it was forming something different. And then he tells this really outrageous part where he saw a child. He looked down and he saw a child, but with a really weird element, which is that the child looked like it was about 4 meters tall, I think he said. And I think this plays into I think this is the first time the Solaris tried to make something from someone's head. This was maybe the first time it happened, and they got it so wrong that they made a child, 15 foot tall or whatever, 4 meters.
I wonder if that's the reason why it does it now, or afterwards. It does it while people are sleeping. That's when it invades the head.
Oh, maybe maybe it's difficult to do it while they're awake. Yeah, there's
because that one was presumably piloting through it.
And the really neat part is that when he's on his way home afterwards, and he's had a bit of a tiff with Kelvin, because Kelvin kind of dismisses what he says, is he calls back and says, "Oh, there's one extra element I need to tell you that I should have mentioned. This is kind of important. Is that years after, because he was friends with the pilot who disappeared and never came back, he went to go see his son. He had a young son, and lo and behold, his son looked identical to, all in the height, obviously, but looked identical to what he saw on the surface of Solaris. And it kind of sets up this idea again that it's making copies of. So you can already sort of see, given what we've already talked about in the movie, you can see that this took this guy's son from his mind and tried to make him, and obviously messed it up a bit, but this was kind of like that. I thought this was a great tease of what was to come, because it was mysterious, it was weird, it was like okay.
Plus, everything looks like modern day when you're watching it, so it doesn't look like we're in a sci-fi film yet. But the story that he's telling is obviously very sci-fi. I mean, they've gone to another planet outside of our solar system. He's describing something truly very alien and a bizarre form of maybe communication, maybe experimentation. Like, it's not a thing that we've ever seen before.
Yeah, what I like about it is there's two parts to it that you said there. Is that the first part is that, okay, they've went to a different planet and they're doing these experiments and they've got a space station and all that. That's the part that all the characters in the movie believe because it's true and they know it's true. But then he starts telling all this stuff that they don't believe. They think he's crazy. This is a bunch of nonsense. And they all react as such. I will say I have one nitpick of this scene is that every time it cuts to like someone else like talking to him in this footage, there's this like weird beeping. It's almost like they're buzzing in to speak, and it plays this beeping noise so much throughout this scene that I was like ready to throw something at the wall. Minor nitpick, but it did annoy me.
Sure.
So, but yeah, so I thought this was a great tease for the rest of the film, and you can sort of see how it plays into what we learn and what the ending eventually is, and because I think the ending maybe tells you where this guy went, this pilot. So super interesting stuff. Through and through. So
I like the guy that shows up in the video beforehand, like giving us the rundown of what we're going to watch and why we're there.
Mm-hmm.
He was very I don't know, he felt very Soviet, like the Soviet part of it came in. Like, don't tell us anything bad now or anything crazy. You're representing Mother Russia here.
So to cut back ahead then to like all this stuff going on with Harry and Kelvin, like there's so much character stuff that comes up that I think is good character discussion stuff. Like like when they're debating whether or not they should do this extreme stuff and to fire this radiation down, Snout has the idea to send down like someone's thoughts, Kelvin being the one that they would use for it, which they do actually try, and then the other guy, the asshole guy, is just kind of like, I think I've thought of a way to kill the creations, and it's like, well, that's a bit cold and dark and violent, but he's just viewing it as like the science specimens. They're just weird things. That's it. They're not living. And it leads to a great scene actually when they're all together in the library, which is probably the only room in the station that looks very natural because it's wooden and has books, and it looks like a room that you'd see on Earth as opposed to a space station.
Right. I think it's interesting the behavior of everybody around her also. Like you can see exactly how everybody feels about her. Like the one guy just doesn't even acknowledge that she's in the room, or at least talks to her like she's like she's not there. Yeah,
Snout is a bit more kind of like friendly about it, but
I think Snout's excited that there's like a young woman. Like he seems to be excited that she's like she's more grown up since he's been dealing with children the whole time.
Yeah. And of course, one of the things
you're lucky you got like a hot lady companion. I have to deal with this kid.
And one of the things that's interesting about Kelvin's character though is that he does become attached to this version of Harry. Like once he realizes she gets scared and then he comforts her, he starts to feel needed by her, right? In the same way that he assumed that she would need to feel needed by him.
Do you think this is also just what would happen if you would get like a version of someone that was in your head versus somebody with who you don't quite understand as well?
I think it starts off that way, but that's the thing. She gains her own agency as the movie goes on. It's this very interesting dynamic because she's kind of Harry, but she's not, and she's starting to have her own experiences and form her own opinions. And she has a big speech about her being a living being and like saying, "Oh, you call us."
She has like an existential crisis.
Yeah. You call us guests. You call us this, and there's a great moment after everyone leaves that like sort of. It's weird to call it a party, but it's like a birthday party scene, where she's staring at a painting. There's like a mural on the wall, and Kelvin comes in, they stare, and it's one of these moments where the movie slows down and just like sort of like the camera just goes over this painting as music plays, because music doesn't play often in the movie. It's only a few key moments where this one track of music plays, but it plays during this, and it's like a early stages of a small town, presumably in North America, maybe the idea of like, and the way I was kind of reading it is it was like this sort of like idea of the frontier, because this station itself is kind of the new frontier. It's the new trying to, and it's actually this scene where the Snout goes onto a bit of a monologue about why they're out there, and says, we claim it's for this and it's that, and it's for getting in touch with the rest of the universe and expanding and all the rest of it, but that's not true. We just want to spread humanity further. We want a mirror. That's what we want. We don't want to like learn about new things. Yeah, we want to just see more of ourselves and sort of confirm that we are important. And I think,
which is what the alien's doing.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what that ties into the theme of the movie of like and that's maybe where the danger of nostalgia, if you want to call it that, kind of comes into it. As much as there's a lot of positive things of like Kelvin working through his guilt about what happened to his wife, and the fact that he's never, because he became a really cold figure after that, and the fact that he did choose his career over her as well. Like there's decisions that he made obviously in his past that are alluded to, and he's forgotten to be a loving person. He's forgotten to look for someone else. You know, even when he thinks about his parents, and we see like there's a couple of quick flashbacks where he's thinking about seeing his mother, and he's thinking about, you know, spending time with his father when he was younger. There are these warm memories, not literally because it's in the snow, but there's these warm memories that
Not all of it's in the snow.
not all of it, but some of it is. Like,
I mean, like when you think about his mom, she goes from like, you know, being around flowers in this like really, you know, bright, colorful dress to being in the snow, like covered in fur and stuff like that, and then goes back to it. So it doesn't seem to be happening like in sequence even. It seems to be out of order.
yeah, that's something I think Tarkovsky likes to mess around with. He likes the idea of like I say, the tone poem where it'll jump around narratively a little bit, regardless of, you know, like he's not scared to just like, oh, I just want to jump to this because this is what he's thinking about, even if it doesn't, in a traditional movie sense, like feels weird to us who are just used to what the modern Hollywood movie rules are. Which I can get into. I think you have to like know you're getting into that though. You have to like be prepared for it. But like it does create a feeling. It creates this kind of like flow of conscience as it goes.
Yeah, it just takes you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
It forces you to think about things a bit more.
So you have this idea that, okay, if all we want, and this is a mistake, but if all we want is kind of like our perfect version of ourselves or a reflection of what we think we are, and that kind of ties into him only seeing a recreation of his version of Harry as opposed to the real Harry. You know, so even in a personal sense, his relationship with her, he didn't want Harry, he wanted the Harry that he thought, or, you know, either conceived her to be or wanted her to be, or whatever version he had in his mind when he thought, this is the Harry I'm going to spend my life with, you know. And then it's like, no, she's a free-thinking person with her own thoughts, and that didn't always line up with him, and that's scary to someone. So,
do you think the ending kind of contradicts that though, or makes it more like tragic?
I think the ending's tragic. I see the ending as him giving in to, like, the ending to me is him basically admitting that he's never going to get over it and be better, so he's just going to give in to the temptation of going to wherever that is, you know?
Right. I mean, if you want to explain it first, then
I should probably explain it.
Making some islands.
Yeah, so towards the end of the movie, he does have some other scenes. He has like a really intense, not intense, that's not the right word, but a really immersive flashback where it actually switches to his mother, and his mother like washes his hand because it's dirty, and it's this really the cleansing and like the comfort of your mother, and going back to the, like, you know, it's almost like he's instead of like fixing his interpersonal issues and skills and what he is as an adult, he's reverting back to just wanting his mother to take care of him. This is, you know, kind of like part of what I was taking from it. But the end of the movie is that you think he's gone back to Earth because the guests, as they call them, have left because of the neutrino bomb or whatever he's done. The other scientist, that is. Who notably, like, because this is a great moment, because Snout's in talking to him, like, you know, it's like the bedside scene where he's telling him what happened, because Kelvin's kind of sick for a little bit towards the end when he's getting really delirious, and the asshole scientist is about to come in, and he hears them talking and basically decides not to. I thought that was a perfect representation of like what that character represents, is that he can't deal with the emotional side of it. He can't deal with the people. Everything's just raw numbers and stats and figures, and because when we do eventually do Stalker, one of the things we're going to talk about a lot is that the three main characters represent the ego, the super ego, and the id, right? The idea that the characters represent broad ideas.
Great, Freud.
But here it does kind of feel like these three characters on the station kind of represent different, like, you know, lines of thinking when it comes to some of this stuff. But yeah, so we think he's going home because Snout says he should, and it feels like he's going to. And the ending is that he's on what looks like the next to his dad's house. And his dad, by the way, mentioned he doesn't like innovation, so they sort of modelled this house after an old-fashioned house.
Yeah, but it means they can use something that's comforting to us and a set that's already around.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I'm not thinking practically. I'm thinking thematically it works because the whole idea that he likes the comfort in the old-fashioned, the nostalgia, the, you know, the olden times that were simpler, as opposed to like Because I think he even has I think he actually has the line, "I don't like innovation." I think that's a line of dialogue that he has at the start of the movie.
He's got a TV though, although it is a black and white TV.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just like a stylistic choice rather than like a TV's just black and white feature. So anyway, so it looks like he's back at his dad's house. He's looking at the water. He's looking at everything. And it's all very slow and tranquil. The music's and I have to say, this is like one of the creepiest moments. Like, I think that I wouldn't say I've seen in a movie, but I think for a movie that's not been creepy up until this point, it's been a theory that's been kind of mysterious and whatever. But there's a moment here as he's walking towards the house, and he notices that there's something wrong with it because there's like almost rain inside the house, like dripping on his dad. And the main thing is that, okay, it could be just a leak, but the fact that his dad's not acknowledging it and just like walking through it, and it
is very much because it rained, when he was on Earth right before he left. It rained and everyone went inside. Well, I think he stood out there in the rain for a little bit, but you see like the tea and stuff filling up with rainwater. So I think it's just, Solaris is made this thing, but she got something wrong. I say she, but like
she, but
it got something wrong.
But this moment is really creepy. It genuinely is unsettling because it is just this one simple little touch of him not acknowledging it makes it feel like he's not real. This isn't real.
And all of a sudden we're like, oh, he didn't go home.
Yeah. And he comes out and Kelvin falls to his knees and hugs his father's legs. Obviously not really his father, but he hugs his father's legs, and the camera pulls up, and we see that this is actually just a really small island in Solaris, and he's on the planet. And he's given in to the fantasy. He's given in to...
Well, we know he doesn't have a good relationship with his father, but in this world, he can.
I mean, that obviously him falling to his knees and hugging him is him wanting to have a good relationship with his father. Definitely. Like, that's something that he definitely wants at the end of the movie, and he regrets, the way he is with them. Obviously, his relationship with his mother obviously seemed very stressed as well. There's so many elements, like... This is why it's such a good movie to discuss, because there's all these themes that are interlinking that do all bounce off of each other. The theme of what is humanity, the theme of his coldness and appreciating what's around him, the themes of the dangers of being too reliant on the past, the theme, all these things, the themes of the new frontier and the idea that this is the new frontier and inherently a new frontier, because if you think about if you think of America, right, you think of the frontier of America, like the people who traveled to what we now know as the United States and founded a lot of like the modern world, they didn't just integrate with the Native Americans, did they? Like, it wasn't like a clean transition.
I don't know any.
Yeah, it was a bit different from that. It was more like, no, we want to establish just, I mean, look, think about what places in America are called. New York. Like New England.
Nova Scotia.
Yeah, like that's Canada, but I same difference. But like so much of it is the idea that it wasn't about accepting what was already there. It's about no. This is now the second York. This is now the second.
This is why people want to go to Mars, right? They want to have a clean slate and start over and do what they want with the people they want. And...
But it's going to be like New York, and it's going to be. Like...
I just mean like there is a romanticism about like a fresh start, starting from scratch and getting it right this time.
Actually, one of the things I think is also a big theme of the movie that ties into these things is back at the start. So after Burton leaves, and there's this long sequence of him traveling into the city in the car.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And it lasts a long time. This is like a very... Do you know what it's almost like? You know how in 2001 you have the Jupiter thing, right? Where he's like, it's just this weird psychedelic trip for like 10 minutes. I
remember that.
This is the opposite of that, but the same idea, which is it's the urban version of it. It's just traveling on a network of highways that all interlink. Because I think that's the important thing about that scene is that even before we go to space, we start off in this beautiful natural world with an old-fashioned house with lots of lakes and green, and then he travels into the city.
We go to Tokyo.
He travels into the city, and it's just concrete interlinking. It's just a network of concrete
Lots of tunnels.
and tunnels.
Yeah,
and
unfortunately,
man-made.
it does kind of date the film, though. It doesn't look very futuristic, and all the cars
No.
and stuff are of that time.
I don't think it matters too much, though, honestly, in the grand scheme of things. Because I don't think this movie wants the world to feel futuristic. It just, like, it's
Well, I mean, they did film it in Tokyo, I believe. It looks like Tokyo to me. It looks like Japan.
Yeah, I'm sure, but I don't think... I think the movie's supposed to feel more or less just like, oh, it's the near future because it's basically today, but we have space travel that's, normal and advanced, and we're going to a space station on another planet. Like, at least if they were trying to make it feel futuristic, I don't think they did much of it. Like, it didn't feel like they were to me. But I think that sequence actually works quite well because the whole point of it is like, look at how much of this place we have ruined with these awful, ugly structures. That and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I think the fact that we can travel via road is a very important part of world society and very convenient, and like I
don't like it.
I'm not speaking out against it. I'm just saying that there is kind of like the world has been completely transformed by us.
I just want portals already.
No
more roads, just portals.
We have already like consumed this world with all of the like. There's no new horizons to conquer, so naturally we're trying to do it on another planet now instead. So the idea that we're going to affect that planet just like we've affected ours, and we already kind of are because there's a little island that's formed that's based on Earth from him, and presumably there's another one. Presumably the pilot from before is on another island somewhere, or maybe it didn't work and he just died and drowned because they didn't make an island in time because it was malfunctioning. I mean, who knows? But like, so
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where the danger of nostalgia kind of comes in, though, is where the memory of something can be very different from what it actually is, and I mean, he wants to make amends with his father, but he chooses to go with the memory of his father versus his actual father to make amends.
Yeah, I think that's why I said I didn't like the word nostalgia so much, is because it's the memory for sure, but it's... I think a lot of the movie with the memory of his wife is more about exploring kind of his, like, what he's not dealt with, this unpacked baggage of why he is the way he is, and why it's important to embrace what has happened to you and the experiences you've went through. And obviously the ending, yeah, he does give in to the illusion rather than going back and doing the real thing. Certainly it's how it feels. I mean, it does feel like a tragic ending to me. The ending, and I think the way the horror music plays as he realizes it's not real, although he still falls to his knees and cries with fake daddy. But like,
she didn't get the details right.
Again, what is she? Why do you think the planet
like
is feminine?
Mother Earth, they all should have. And plus, she creates life. It's a woman thing.
Okay, sure. I'm sure there's a couple of species where the man gives birth, but yeah, sure.
Well, I mean, the seahorse.
There you go.
Seahorse does, yeah.
There you go. Basically, that's like Arnold and Junior is a seahorse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the only one I can think of anyway.
Yeah, this is a fine. It's a fine example. But I like that idea to me is. It's maybe less about embracing nostalgia and more about giving in to just your illusion of it rather than the reality of it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like he would rather, like, it's more about like just fantasizing about it and that's enough if it feels real enough rather than actually doing it for real. And maybe he doesn't have the option. Maybe he does know that by the time he gets back, his dad's maybe going to be dead. But it certainly doesn't feel like a film where he's learned his lesson. It feels like a film where he's accepted the turn that he made in his life after his wife's death and the person that he became. But he's not actually. He's kind of acknowledging that he's never really going to be strong enough to fight it or change it, and change who he is. That's kind of what the ending to me feels like. But I think it's open to interpretation, though. Like I think that's just my reading on it.
Sure.
Would you have any like? Did you feel differently? Do you feel like there's an alternate take to this?
I mean, Not really. I just assumed that it was, giving into what you have in your mind is better for you because you don't have to deal with too many challenges if it's reality and people can think for themselves and decide things for themselves and act in a way that maybe you don't expect. So I just kind of feel like he picked the easy way out, which is a bit of a tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the simplest way to put it. Yeah, he takes the easy sort of like option in front of him rather than confronting anything for real. So it is a sad ending. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, and like I say, we kind of like discussed the movie in portions because like all the things that sort of link together. But I will say for a movie that's like very intentionally slow in 2 hours and like 45 minutes, I don't think it feels as long as it is, bizarrely.
Oh, yeah, I think it feels like a 2 hour plus film.
It's one of those weird things where, when I check the time, by the time he's getting into the station, I'm like, oh wait, we're already 45 minutes in, man. Like,
it was like, wow, we went this long without going to the station. Okay.
but in a good way though, because I actually think most of that's the early stuff flew in. Like everything.
I think there's some. I don't know if we need like the car ride as much as maybe you do. I think
Sure.
a lot of this stuff could have been shortened a little bit. Like we get the point, but I understand I definitely understand the beginning of trying to be in the natural world as much as possible because he's about to go to something very artificial, and he just wants to like have the memory of it, which plays in for later.
I think there's also
we should establish the relationship with his father, and I think getting the backstory is maybe not as necessary, but I'm okay with it being there from the other pilot.
Oh, I love the other pilot stuff. I was going to add in that I think maybe there's also like a natural progression. Like if the movie's playing with time and it's playing with the idea of like the old new frontier and the new frontier and all that, and then we talked about the natural world and then the urban world and then space. Like, there is kind of a natural progression to like nature, green lakes, trees, all that stuff, and then the urban world, which is kind of like the modern version of like where we are technology wise, and then the future, which is space station. That's like the most advanced. Like there is kind of like a natural progression through it. I do think it's kind of funny that more time is spent on the trip into the city in the car than there is on the way to the space station.
Yeah.
The roads are actually given more time to like dwell on. I mean, admittedly, do you lose much by cutting that in half to speed it up a little bit? Probably not, admittedly. But I think that's maybe just like a taste
Obviously,
thing.
You need to bookend the film with what you have for sure. But I think 45 minutes is a long time to spend to establish he likes being on Earth and he doesn't like his father very much.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, even that idea, like the idea that the Earth that's created for him at the end is just like what he remembers of Earth. So things about it,
and not just that, like the most recent memory of Earth.
Yeah,
at least from what we know.
Because there is a couple of shots of the lake where I think on the second viewing I had this week where I was noticing the water looked a bit weird, like it was a bit too still. And I don't know if that's just a happy accident because it's how they looked that day, or if it's like this bit like no, it's actually kind of made of like not water, like there's like it's like a solid almost like look to it in a weird way.
Just one of the details they didn't get right.
Yeah, like there might be like some Easter eggs in there for like things that are just slightly off or don't work. Like I dig the feeling as he's walking up to the house and he sees his dad, like that eeriness. It feels quite devastating, and part of me thinks, well, if he gave in, is he aware that he gave in and he's just on Solaris? Because the way he reacts to this feels like he's realizing it, and it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like he knew for sure. It feels like he's kind of almost subconsciously
sure
said that. Although, can I posit a theory? This might be complete bullshit, right? I might posit a theory. What if this isn't really him? What if he himself is a copy as well? And this is just Solaris trying to make him.
I actually thought about that. I think on the second viewing of Cat is literally destroying my tree right now. I was thinking that maybe it could have been that thought crossed my mind. I think the second time I watched it, but I don't really know what the point of it would be. Like, why would Solaris do that? Start an island for itself with his memories. I mean, maybe just another experiment to see how it would react, but I'm not really sure. Like, given what we've seen from what Solaris does as more of like an experimentation thing, I'm not quite sure what the point of that one would be. It's just experimenting with itself at that point.
Yeah.
But I also like the idea of he thought he was going home, and all of a sudden he realizes he's on an island on Solaris, and just cries to his dad about it.
Well, just to explore the idea for a second, I think, like, how can you know, like, why they're doing it, really? Like we don't really know what their motives are. I mean, we've speculated and we've tried to tie it in thematically, but, like, there could be a reason for them to essentially make their own little petri dish. You know, in the same way that Kelvin has a little tin with a little plant in it, right? To remind him of Earth. Like, the idea that they're trying to create their own little example from his mind, from what they've seen of him on Earth. Like, I'm not saying that I think this is the case. I definitely still think it is him that's made a bad choice, or subconsciously made this choice to be weak and go down there instead. But I do think it's interesting, and I think it would maybe tie into the idea of, like, just from our thoughts, we've already corrupted this place, and now it's trying to recreate things from Earth and trying to adapt it and do things with it. I mean, there's ideas. I mean, it could also tie into the idea as well that, you know, Harry, over the course of the film, became self-aware, understood that she was created from, like, a memory, and questioned her own reality, and understood that she was changing from Harry because now she was forming her personality on her new experiences that were actual experiences on the, you know, the short time she had in the ship. Whereas, so maybe, like, this Kelvin at the end is his realization here is not that I'm on Solaris. His realization is I'm one of them. I'm a creation of Kelvin as opposed to the real Kelvin. But again, I'm theorizing for the fun of it here, rather than, like, arguing the case for this. It's just, I don't think you can rule it out. I think it's a valid potential idea.
I guess I wonder if has it always been the same Harry then, just coming back, because she can be killed. So every time, like when he sent her out into space to kill her, is it the same one that comes back, or does Lars just make another one?
Well, I mean, only one gets killed, and then it's from that point on, it's the same one for a while, right? The one who comes after that is the one that sticks around for quite some time. But there is a scene towards the end where he's getting delirious and he wakes up and he sees more than one. There's like 3 Harrys at the same time, and then his mother's also there as well at the same time.
I thought I dreamt that scene.
No, that scene was there. So there is more than one, and there's even at one point I think Snout even says, like, if you're sad that because Harry, I mean, we kind of glossed over this, but Harry has such an existential crisis that she actually goes to kill herself. She drinks liquid nitrogen. She
tries many times, yeah.
But she keeps coming back because she can't die. That's the same one, I believe, you know, just waking back up. Whereas at one point Snout even says, like, hey, if you really want a Harry back, like, there's one floating out there in a shuttle or a rocket that you sent out.
Okay.
Like, he
so
even
there
says
is at least one copy.
Yeah. So I think, like, they can just keep making more of her. Like, it's not like I don't think the one.
So is she really gone then? If they destroy her in the machine?
Good question. Well, we don't really know how it works. So we don't know, like, did they put them into a machine, or because I got the impression they just kind of, like, released, like, a thing into the air and it just, like, kills them all.
I was getting, like, Dr. Manhattan vibes of being torn apart atom by atom. Yeah.
Maybe a more interesting question is, though, is the one in the rocket still there because she wasn't anywhere in the station by the time all this stuff happened? I don't know. But I think what we can say for sure, though, is that the main Harry that sticks around and, like, evolves and, like, thinks for herself, I don't think she definitely does not have the memories of the one who went in the rocket. So I think she's definitely distinct in that sense. It's not like they have the memory of the previous copies that got snuffed or whatever. But yeah, it's a really thought-provoking film that deals with regret. It deals with our conception of other people, our conception of ourselves, and ultimately, I mean, if you want to boil the movie down, like, you know, all the talk of reflection and mirrors and looking at ourselves, like, this is a movie about a man who ultimately has this really harsh look at himself through seeing his dead wife and through having to debate this with the other characters. Like, he comes to all these realizations. It's kind of like all this self-reflective thing. That's what the planet does for him. And maybe that's saying as well that, you know, like part of the point of exploration and new frontiers is that whoever we do encounter that's different, like that can be an asset because it can make us like understand ourselves better because of how we interact with them. So I think there's some broad, like really cool concepts in there that the movie is touching on. And then you add onto that just some really cool sci-fi ideas, and you wrap it up in a filmmaker who's very strong, confident style, isn't afraid to be a little abstract or poetic at times, or you know, just be like, you know, I'm going to do a David Lynch style scene. Obviously, he wouldn't have said that at the time because David Lynch was, you know, barely making a short movie in 1972, but. You know, but effectively, like some scenes do feel like they could be in a Lynch movie, the way they're shot or the way they're paced. And as someone who's a fan of David Lynch movies, I don't have a problem with that. But
yeah, there's some Kubrick parallels too,
for sure. Which is why it's interesting that he's not like super into 2001. I think that's the interesting part is that I think what was the quote? It was something to like he thought like 2001 was too cold and like something. So the idea that
interesting choice of words.
So well, I think the point is that he wants to focus more on the emotional side of things. So his film that's set in space is all about like self-exploration. Whereas
I could see that. I think you know 2001 is more about humanity versus the internal struggle.
So yeah, Solaris, a very heady film. I feel like people who study philosophy could probably sit and talk about it for 10 hours straight, quoting philosophers from like all of human history, and I'm sure it's all perfectly valid. But I think as two fairly not completely idiot people,
medium people,
I think it's still an interesting film to watch and think about the ideas it presents and what it's talking about. So yeah, I liked it a lot, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't know if I ever just said I liked it at the start, but I like it a lot, if that wasn't clear. That said though, I will actually agree with Mr. Tarkovsky. I think Stalker is an even better film, but that's not to knock on what this achieves or what it's good at by any means. So yeah, I guess we're at the point. Tara, what are you going to rate Solaris out of 10?
Yeah, I think it's very good. It's a real think piece, and I really enjoy the performances, especially from the lead female, and I enjoyed the discussion, so I think I'm going to give it an 8.
Okay, interesting. I think it's a straight 9 for me. I think it's one that I gave maybe close to that anyway the first time I saw it, like a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But watching it again, thinking about it, because I know I'm going to talk about it, so really, and with a film like this, you know, like, I don't always look up like what anyone else has said after I've watched it before we talk about it, but every so often there's a movie like this where I'm like, you know what, I want to make
heavy stuff.
Yeah, I want to, like, you know, get a little bit of a pointer on like how to think in some ways, like, you know, give me some themes that I can think about, and then I can think about how the scenes actually achieve those themes or achieve like those ideas. And so especially watching it that second time this week after watching it the first time, but also reading a few things here or there about like how other people have interpreted it, like really like makes you think about those themes as you're watching it, so you get a lot more out of all these little moments and scenes, and you're like, oh, I can see, you know. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for me, but really good stuff. And that's obviously a very high score. When I said Stalker was even better, like Stalker is Stalker is the last movie I saw that I gave a 10 to. So, you know, just put that in perspective. It would have been pretty immense if it did happen to match that.
I gave like 4 10s out last week.
Well, I mean 10 for a first time watch. I'm not counting rewatches. unless you mean that too, in which case you're a mad woman who is giving out 10s like candy. Stop it.
Eyes Wide Shut. First time I've seen that.
Okay. I like it a lot. I don't know if I'd go to the 10 on it, but
it's Kubrick. Gotta put a ring on it.
Okay. So that's Solaris. So hopefully the extra weight was at least partially worth it on this one. So yeah, looking over the next little bit. So this is going out over the next couple of days from recording, and then the next episode will probably be about a week and a bit later, when Matrix 4 is ready to talk about. So, and then we'll get back to the 70s movies after that and go from there. So have no fear. All of that is coming. But Tara's going to pose for the thumbnail. So here we go. I have no idea what she's going to do for this, but look Russian. 3, 2, 1, pose. Not bad. Not bad. So there you go. In Mother Russia, planet explores you. Hey.
Not bad.
That kind of works. That was a good joke. All right. So yeah.
Yakov Smirnov still alive.
So yeah, let us know what you think of the movie in the comments. Like and subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. All of it is super important and helps us out a lot. But you can also support us financially over on Patreon. Can't they, Tara?
That's right, Peter. If you enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/mouthfuzztv. And if you donate as little as $1 per month, you will get access to bonus episodes of The Ace. So you can find your favorite B movie titles and even some sequels. We do some sequels from shows that we've watched on this channel for patrons only. We're going through the Tremors series right now. So if that interests you, check it out.
Patrons and also YouTube members, worth mentioning now. That's a more recent thing, but those Patreon bonus episodes do go up for YouTube members, which is like a paid subscription thing on YouTube directly. They're way behind. They're like a year and a half behind on what episodes they're getting, but those bonus episodes are making their way for YouTube members, one per month gradually. So
cool.
Yeah, you can access that a different way. In case you just rather subscribe through YouTube for a couple of bucks instead of over on Patreon. But Patreon has higher tiers with more things on offer, like voting and early access and all sorts of shenanigans. But yeah, so there you go.
That's right, Peter.
Do you want to see a catchphrase again? Also, I do kind of love that your catchphrase is "That's right, Peter."
That's not my catchphrase. How dare you?
All right, that has been Solaris. Let us know what you think of the movie. But yeah, so we'll see. So the schedule's a little bit weird over this Christmas period, but we'll be back with Matrix Resurrections, is what it's called, yeah. And like a week and a bit, whatever, once it comes out a couple of days later, you'll have a review, most likely. And then we'll be back to the 70s movies after that. So look forward to all of that stuff. We will see you soon. Have a nice Christmas, since this is the last episode going out before Christmas. So have a nice festive time, and we will see you on the other side. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.